Hey guys, Josh with Link Spider. Today we're going to talk about updating the firmware on your GoPro camera. Spring baseball and softball is getting ready to come up. We want to make sure that you've got everything that you need to get ready for a big impact. All right, so firmware on a GoPro. Firmware is the base software that runs on any device. GoPro comes up with firmware adjustments and updates anytime they find fixes, anytime they add features, and there may be reasons why you would or would not want to run them. Um, there's a bit of a risk anytime you go and do a firmware update, so you always want to do it cautiously. You want to do it when you have time to get it done right. And so we're going to show you today how to do an update manually. You may feel uncomfortable doing this. You'd wonder why. Why wouldn't I do this on my smartphone? I've got the quick app. It's telling me there's an update. Why wouldn't I do it on that? And there's a couple reasons why you would want to do that, why you'd want to do it manually. The biggest reason is that it is safer and faster to do it externally. And the way this process is going to work is we're going to go to a website, we're going to download the file, we're going to copy that file to an SD card, we're going to put it in our camera, we're going to boot the camera up, and it's going to recognize the new software. That same process kind of works on the phone app, but you have to recognize how that works. You're doing that wirelessly at that point. Your app sees that there's an update. It goes out to GoPro and it downloads that update to your phone. So there's some speed issues there. It then transfers that to your GoPro, and then it has to prepare itself to do the update. And in the past, we've had issues with the GoPro camera, and anytime we've reached out to support, they've always said, do a firmware update and do it manually. So while we don't have the specifics from GoPro of why you would want to do it, clearly it is a cleaner way of doing an update. The second reason, and for us, this is why we do this, there is a firmware that GoPro makes called GoPro Labs, and we're going to do a whole session on that later. But what GoPro Labs is it's kind of their beta software. They release new features, and they released some advanced features that's only going to be on the labs. And we like that software because it allows you to do QR codes. That your phone, or excuse me, your camera will scan those QR codes, and it will perform those special features. We really like that. It also has some options that you can't do on the base firmware, and one of those is telling it to ignore the power issues on a USB battery. Starting with the Hero 10, they had a power issue. They have a minimum power requirement, and if your battery is sort of right on the ragged edge of that requirement, and or it doesn't recognize the power of that battery, when you try to run without an internal battery, it will throw an alarm and it will tell you not enough power, and it won't let you get past it. And that's a big problem because we highly recommend removing the battery on a GoPro camera because that's how you mitigate heat the most. And so the GoPro Lab software has a feature called Ignore USB Power. And what that means is to ignore the actual power quantity and to assume that it's safe power. And in all of the batteries that we have tested, we've been able to power our camera. So that fixes our problems. And again, there's a few other features, and we're going to go in depth in a separate video. But in order for you to do that, you will need to know how to do it manually. So there's a new update out now for the GoPro Hero 12. And so we're going to walk you through that process right now. And there's a couple of things that you want to do to sort of prepare for that. First and foremost, you need to have your battery in place, your internal battery in place, and it needs to have a pretty decent power. So that's the first thing that we're going to check, is we're going to turn our camera on with the side button. It's going to boot up, and we have got, looks like 94%. That's plenty. If it was less than, let's say, 60%, I would probably not do it. I would recharge the battery, or I would find a different battery. And the second thing that I would probably do is I would reformat the card. And so to do that, we're going to swipe down, we're going to swipe over, we're going to go Preferences, we're going to scan all the way down to the bottom, we're going to hit Reset, and we're going to tell it to format the card. Obviously, make sure that there are not things on this card that you want before you do this. We highly recommend reformatting the card anytime you're ready to start fresh. So you've recorded some stuff you've copied that stuff to your computer, you have waited until you've gotten home. That's important because that way you have 2 copies of these files. You've validated that everything is where you need, and at that point, you would then reformat the card. Keeping that card reformatted keeps it really clean and everything running fast, and a faster card means a cooler camera. Okay, so we're going to hit reformat. We're going to let it run through its trials here. Formatting the card. This is a 128-bit SanDisk Extreme, so the bigger the card, the longer it takes to reformat. And then after that, we're going to press and hold the side button, and we're going to turn the camera off. All right, we've waited for it to power off completely. The second thing that I think is important is to take this side door off. We've got the pass-through door. That is the door that allows you to plug a USB cable in. That's critical for when you're running without an internal battery. That's the only way to keep that cavity closed up and protected from the weather. But when I'm doing things where I'm adding and removing the card quite a bit, I like to take this door off because it keeps it out of the way. And this is designed to come off. It's actually pretty easy. So you're going to open up this door, and you're going to turn this door. I'm going to turn it this way so you can see. I'm going to turn this way. Okay, there's a little clip here across this bar. And again, this is designed to do this. You're not going to break this. We're just going to take and we're going to pop it off like this. And that door came off, and now we can get to stuff and not have to go fiddling with that door. Okay? So then we are going to take this SD card out. It's difficult to do one-handed. And we're going to put it in our card reader. I'll put it aside here. All right, we've got our card reader in there, and we're going to go over to our computer, and we've got silly questions that have come up. We're going to close that, and we're going to open up our browser here, or our Explorer, and go this PC. Okay, now let's say you had a whole bunch of stuff on here, and you wouldn't really know which one this one is. We name our cards, so this is a SanDisk Extreme 128. And it's the 7th card. It's just an incremental number that we have. But let's say you didn't know which one that was. The easiest way to find out is to go over here and unplug that card. That guy's going to go away. And then we're going to plug it back in while we're watching our screen so we can see which one it is. All right? So it's this guy right here. All right? So then we validated that our card is nice and clean. This is stuff that's generated whenever whenever the camera is formatted, and that's fine. That's not going to cause us any issues. So we're going to minimize that and get us out of the way here. And then we are going to open up our browser again. And let's get back over here. And Google does a pretty good job, or GoPro does a pretty good job, I'm not sure which one, of taking you directly to what you're looking for here. If you type download GoPro and the version of your camera firmware, the very first option is going to be what you're looking for, okay? So in this case, this is the Hero 11. We're going to do the Hero 12. So we're going to come back here. We're going to type download GoPro Hero 12 firmware. And that takes us to this page right here that says Hero 12 Black Update page. We're going to click on that. All right, and this is giving you all the information about the latest update. And this is another reason why we recommend going through this process, because we're going to download this file that is related to Hero 12 Black 2.0. Was released on December the 14th, 2023. And what's important is, if for some reason this version doesn't work, we would really like to have an old version that we could go back to. For the most part, GoPro releases updates and they've gone through all the beta testing. Everything works. There's not usually a problem. But let's say they updated a feature and that feature sort of broke something that you have relied on to, specifically going into a game weekend. If you are diligent about updating your firmware and having time to play with your camera before you really need it, and then having backup files of the previous downloads, then when something goes wrong, you can just load the other one in. All right? So that's a good deal. The other thing is, when you're here, it's always a good idea to kind of take a peek at the stuff that it fixes. And we don't always update our firmware because if there's something on here that doesn't really pertain to us, we probably won't update it. If everything is working, there's no sense in messing with the firmware. Every time they come out with an update, there are things down here on usability improvements that always say general user interface improvement and general bug fixes. And to the best of my knowledge, you will never find out what those are. I'm sure that there are things that they've gone in and tweaked. It may be a big bug, it may be a small bug, or it may just be the junk that they put in there and they just say, hey, we fixed a bug. To the best of my knowledge, unless it specifically said what a new feature was or that they fixed something, that doesn't really tell me anything. But in this particular update, one of the things that I'm interested in playing with is this enables renaming of custom presets on the QuickPro app. So whenever you create a preset on the GoPro, it says custom 1 or custom 2, and I like to know which. In fact, I keep little notes on what my custom 1 and custom 2 is. If I have a high quality version that I'm going to do for slow motion videos later, or I have my basic 1080p 30 that I do for just raw recording where I know I'm not going to do any post-processing and I want the most bang for my buck, I want to keep the camera as cool as possible, I want to be able to name those. And this new version, while we haven't played with it yet, claims to give us the ability to do that. So that's why we're doing this, okay? So on this page, we're going to scroll down just a little bit further. And depending on the computer that you have, this is what you're going to use. We're going to talk about doing it on the Windows. I don't support Mac OS, so I apologize. You're going to be on your own there, but hopefully if you've used both, you can take this and know how to make it work for Mac. We're going to click on Windows OS. And this is going to kind of give you a graphic display of what I'm going to explain how to do here. But what's important is you want to click on this download update. And we're going to do that. And if you can see, if you're running Chrome, you'll see up here that it is in the process of downloading. In this case, it's a 118 megabyte file. And this is going to go into your downloads folder. All right, that is done. We're going to minimize that. We're going to go Windows key R, that gets us to the run line, and we're going to type downloads. Okay. The other thing that we could have done when we had this open is we could have clicked this and we could have said open to that folder. Okay, and that took me to downloads. Either way works. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to right click on this guy right here. This is the file that we downloaded. And we're going to hit extract all, and right here is sufficient. We're going to let that file decompress. Okay, so now we have this update file here. What you need to know is you need to go back to downloads, and this file, update, is what we want to copy to that SD card. Don't go inside here and copy these files because the GoPro camera is not going to see them. It's looking for a folder called update when the camera boots. So we're going to keep that right there. So it's at this point where I would take this file, I would actually take both of them, and I would copy them over to somewhere on my computer where I keep track of GoPro firmware updates. I'd keep a folder called GoPro, and inside that folder I've got Heroes 5 all the way up to Heroes 12, and inside that folder I've got production and GoPro Labs, and then in there I put a folder for each of the versions and I dump all this stuff in there. And that may sound like a crazy amount of excess, but really what's most important is the last firmware that you ran that you know works, that's the one that you want to keep a hold of, because if this one doesn't work, you want to be able to go back to that. If you're doing this for the first time and you don't have an old version, there are ways of undoing an update, but it's complicated. We'll hope that this version works and that you won't have to worry about it. And if it doesn't work, the next video that we do will show you how to use the GoPro Labs, and that will fix any problems that this may cause. I've never seen a manual update not work. I've never seen it cause the camera to not boot. They used to call that bricking. I've never seen that happen, but anytime you update a firmware, that is a risk that you need to be aware of. Okay, so remember before we had a folder, we had the losing words here. Got too many things open. In the My Computer, we had this PC, that's what I was looking for. And we had this, and our computer is this I or L drive. I can't tell because it's lowercase or uppercase. But this drive right here, this SDE 128_7, we're going to double click on that. And again, that's got our GoPro stuff on there that created when it was reformatted. But we're going to take this update folder, not the update zip. We're going to take this update folder and we're going to right click and we're going to drag over here and we're going to say copy. And that is going to copy to that SD card. Okay, and when that little gizmo right there gets done, you know the file is there. We can now close all of this stuff, and then we can go back to over here. I'm going to pop this out. And then we're going to take and we're going to put this in our camera. Now, if you have a hard time remembering what direction this goes, if you look at these little SD cards, they've got the label and they've got a little bump, and that little bump is so that you have something to grab a hold of. And if you think about on the GoPro camera, the only place you would have something to grab a hold of is on the battery side. That's the only place you could get your finger in. The other thing that's kind of important is some of the older cameras, and I assume this is the same. If you happen to get this at an angle, you could kind of get it behind the motherboard, and you can cause all kinds of problems. So just kind of drop it in there, and then let's go over here, and then just take that and push it down with your finger until it seats. And I have accidentally let my fingernail off before it was down, and the SD card shot across the room. So that's a fun little test that you can worry about. But anyhow, those SD cards are small and they're brittle and things, so just kind of be careful as you're doing that. All right, so this camera is off. We've got the SD card in place, and then we're going to turn the camera on. And if you don't know how to do that, again, this is your mode button. It's also your power button. When the camera is off, you just want to do a single press. And when you single press, it's going to look, and it knows that there's an update folder on that camera. And because of that, it's going to go open inside that update folder, and it's going to read all of those individual files. And it knows what it needs to do, and it's going to perform that update task. And depending on the size of the update, I'm going to assume, depending on what version you came from, it's hard telling how long it will take. So we're going to let it run. And I may edit this out depending on how long it takes, but I'd kind of like you to see the whole process and kind of how long it takes. We'll sit there and watch it run. Camera shut down. May reboot a couple of times too. Okay, we got the update complete. That's what you're looking for. You'd always want to make sure when you're doing these updates that you do not interrupt the process. That's why it's critical that you have a full battery, because if the battery goes dead before it's done, that could leave the camera in a state where it wasn't complete, and that's when it could brick it. So looks like we got that done. If you're interested in checking what you did, scroll down, swipe to the left, Preferences, scroll up, and we're going to go About, Camera Info, and it's going to tell us the version. In this case, it says version 2.0. And if we go back to our web here, back up just a little bit. Well, I went too far. And that matches the version that we downloaded, Hero Black 2.0. That's kind of important that you double check that so that you know that you got done what you needed. And that's it. Like I said, you can do this on your phone. In most cases, it probably won't cause you a problem. But again, like we have said, we had issues in the past, and a manual update did fix the problems that we were having. So clearly, it's a cleaner way of doing it. And if you ever think you would do the GoPro Labs firmware, you need to have a comfort level of doing this, because you may want to go back and forth between the production version of the firmware and the GoPro Labs firmware. And this is how you do that. I hope this answered any questions that you guys might have. Again, I know this is kind of basic stuff. If you're familiar with updating cameras, you've probably known how to do that, but it's important that you know how to do that before we do the GoPro Labs video, which is the next video that we're going to do. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Josh at Link Spider. Thanks, guys.